So we've done the main portion of the activity. The children have participated, they've gone through it. How are we going to wrap this up? And how we wrap it up, similar to how we introduce it, but there is even more flexibility in how we wrap it up based on the kind of activity it is. Is it a time activity? Is it a set activity that this is all that's happening with the activity, where there is no open-endedness because you're just going to be presenting an activity, the children are going to do it, and then when they're finished they can walk away, or there can be a set time that this is done, like with the yoga sequence, the set time of when this is done, and everything is then the mats are then rolled up and put away. That could be the conclusion, is going through the breathing. And if you had the children set up the mats, you can have the children put the mats away. That is a way to conclude a timed activity of yoga. If it's flow in and flow out, where the children can kind of come and go from this activity, if, for instance, it is a provocation that's been set up in your loose parts table, how are they going to wrap it up? How do the children transition out? Do they just dump their things and run away? With intentional teaching, we generally don't have them just walk away from something. There is some sort of concluding aspect of it that will be adult led or adult inspired if it's been a representation. So how a child walks away and transitions out of it. So if we go back to like maybe that cutting exercise where we were creating the collage of, oh, I see that you're finished. Please put your scissors back in the bucket. Please tell me a little bit about your collage. Inviting the child to tell you about the collage is the conclusion of that. A conclusion is not everybody go, yay, we did it. That's not the conclusion of the activity. The conclusion is a review of what you've done, engaging the child to be a little bit reflective on what has happened or what has transpired so that they can shift gears and move into a different activity. Activities that are open-ended will have an element to them of the conclusion that sometimes is a part of the introduction, which you give the conclusion at the beginning of the activity. When you're finished, this is what's going to happen. If it is completely open-ended, when you're finished, you'll take your painting and we will hang it up. If you need help, you'll bring it to me. And that is how that is cleaned up. When you're finished, part of this activity is going to be washing out all of the paint trays. That's taking responsibility for what's happening. It's not just taking the paint trays and dumping them in the sink. That's not taking responsibility for the activity. Taking responsibility for the activity and being engaged in the activity goes back to the beginning part. It's not cleaning up the mess, which is a byproduct of the activity. It is going back and continuing that activity so that it closes a circle and wraps it all up in a neat and tidy way that also reviews what was happening in the activity. This is often the most difficult part when you have open-ended or flow in, flow out activities. If you're sitting down and you're presenting something, it's a little bit easier to go back through and review and say, okay, we are now finished from today, and ask the children what they thought or how they felt through the activity. So this can be very, very specific, or it can be something as simple as when the child feels they're finished, they will then come to me, or they will just then hang up their painting, or whatever the activity is, it will be finished in that way. Why do we want to conclude an activity? To conclude the intentional teaching time. So when you say, if you're doing an intentional teaching moment of painting, for instance, when you're finished, you will go and you will hang up your painting. That concludes the intentional, but it allows the children to have an open-endedness of that activity. It supports the transition from one activity to another. If this is a timed activity, it is that, okay, we are now finished. It's time to transition to something else. And please tell me about whatever it is the child created. Please tell me about how you felt about the activity. Please tell me something that you learned about whatever it is that you're presenting. If they were building towers out of magnet tiles, but you were talking about airports, you can ask each child, where is your airport? Where do the airplanes go when they are leaving your airport? So that's a way to conclude the activity. And also to share the children to share with the children that they can recreate this activity on their own. That can also be the end, is saying that you can continue doing this as long as you like, or it can be, we're now finished with this, and but it's going to be here and you'll be able to use it again, and you'll be able to do this again, and then taking yourself out of the actual activity. So let's look at the activities plans that we've been reviewing all along and see how they concluded. Okay, so here are some examples, and just a reminder that a conclusion can be putting the materials away if it's in a systematic way that reinforces the intention of the activity, singing or re-singing the opening song or asking open-ended questions for older children. So what we have here is that at the end of the infant activity is lowering the volume of the music gradually, so until it fades away. Gather the babies together on the mat and sing softly. We heard sounds from faraway places today. Did you feel them? And that can happen with this type of infant activity. If you notice that an infant is just not wanting to participate anymore, and because this is for a small group and the practitioner is with one or two infants, that part of it can then be that it might not be the same for every child. It might be that a child is getting wiggly and they're not done. Oh, are you finished listening to the sounds from around the world? I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. And then transitioning them and letting them move along their way. If it's a timed activity, and this is how this practitioner set it up, when they came to the end of the time, they lowered the volume to end that part of the activity. So let's look forward at the yoga activity and the feelings activity and see how they wrote their conclusions. Okay, so this one, the yoga activity, is the cool down is 5 minutes. That's how it's going to be concluded. Laying down like sleeping bears, star stretches with arms open wide, and final calming breath with hands again on the stomach to feel the breathing going up and down. And then the children are free to move from there. The activity could be, a conclusion could also be rolling up the yoga mats and put them away. Rolling up a mat and putting them away also works fine motor and gross motor skills. So that can be included in the activity if that was part of the learning intention in a passive or in a very intentional way. The conclusion for the one on feelings, to sum up, to say, pointing at the pictures, that yes, we sometimes feel sad and we sometimes feel happy. So this could actually be written a little bit differently, and I'm going to get to that into the final thoughts and where we go from here. Okay, so my final thoughts and reflections, especially when talking about the one of where the emotion cards. So, a way to put that intentionally for wrapping that up and putting those cards away is having all of the cards laid out and asking an individual child, please bring me the sad face, please bring me the happy face. Or you could ask a child, make a face, and then have the other child guess what those faces are based on the pictures and the child who is pretending to have that particular emotion. That's a way to include it and to also encourage the putting away aspect of a particular activity, and inviting the children that if they want to use the emotion cards again, that they can, and this is where they can find them. So now that we've gone through all of this, we've defined our vocabulary, we've gone to the conclusion. So what do we do now with these activity plans? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about differentiation, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a reflective practice and why that is important.